How did I become a welder here in Japan even without any welding experience? How did I get selected by the employer? Come, this is William, welder here in Japan, and this is my Japan journey. My two friends and I applied through Chartreuse Prime Specialist Agency. We were lined up for an employer interview. Out of 50 applicants, they were going to select 7. And unfortunately, I was not chosen by the employer, but my two friends were selected. I went home alone, feeling like I was not myself. I couldn't explain what I felt that day. After 2 weeks, the agency called me, saying I would be lined up for an employer via biodata selection without needing a face-to-face interview, and the result was that I was selected as a reserve. As a reserve, I needed to study Nihongo for 3 months. I had no choice but to study Nihongo. A reserve steps in if there are problems with a selected applicant. After studying Nihongo for 3 months, I was again waiting to be lined up for an employer. At that time, there were no employers in the category I applied for, which was machine operator. I waited for another month and followed up with the agency, but there was still no lineup for machine operators, only for welders. The agency asked me if it was okay to line me up as a welder. I was hesitant because I had no experience in welding, but after thinking it over, I called the agency to be lined up as a welder because I wanted to leave at that time since my debts were increasing and I had no job. On the day of the interview, there were 48 of us, and only 3 would be selected. Almost everyone I talked to during the interview were veteran welders who had worked in different countries. I was the only one without welding experience. I lost confidence and decided to sleep in my chair while waiting to be called in for the interview. When my name was called, I entered the room to face the employer. There were 2 of us applicants entering the room at the same time to be interviewed together. I was the first to do my self-introduction, Jiko Shokai. I did my best in my self-introduction, having practiced for a long time, and I was able to say it clearly and without any nervousness. After I finished, I sat down in the chair, and the employer noticed the other applicant, who had a large build. The employer started interviewing him and seemed to forget to ask me any more questions, then told me to leave and wait for the result outside. I wanted to go home at that point because I knew the result would be negative again. I decided to sleep in my chair again while waiting. After the 48 applicants were interviewed, I was suddenly called back into the room. I felt a surge of hope and went back inside to face the employer again. The employer asked me if I had any experience in welding. Without hesitation, I replied that I had no experience and had never held a welding machine, but I was willing to learn. Another employer, out of the 4 sitting in front of me from the same company but in different positions, asked me what makes me happy in my daily life. I didn't expect that kind of question, but I answered that being with my family and providing for their needs makes me happy. The employer then said that I couldn't go to Japan because being with my family makes me happy, and Japan is far from the Philippines. I responded that I am willing to sacrifice my own happiness to be with them as long as I can provide for their needs, which is why I want to go to Japan. I didn't know where my answers came from. It was just what I thought at that moment. Then I left the room again. After leaving, I felt nervous, and my heart was pounding. The agency staff came out to announce the names of the selected applicants, and I couldn't believe it when I heard my name among those selected. I was extremely happy when I was chosen, and it made me realize that in every situation, the Lord has a plan for us. Here are my tips for those planning to apply to Japan during the employer interview. Practice your self-introduction, speaking each word clearly and loudly. My self-introduction caught the employer's attention, which is why I was given another chance to be interviewed. Be honest with yourself and don't lie during the interview. Tell the truth. Sit properly and do not move your feet and hands. Do not wear any jewelry. If you have any questions, comment down below.